and welcome back to my channel. It is a really sunny day outside today. You might see some reflection on the wall there. Every time when a car drives up, the glass reflects onto the wall. So I have looked at all of your requests, and I have noticed that most of you really like my videos where I talk about memories of my past, memories with my dad, things that I've done. I've also noticed, of course, that a lot of you really love my eating videos. I will see if I can do an eating video again next week. But before I'm getting started with the topic that I would like to talk about today, I want to say welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And also, do you have a favorite animal? If it's not one animal, what type of animal is your favorite animal? Like a land animal or specific, type of cat species or anything. For me, the reason why I'm asking is because I really like water animals, as most of you know. But even though I have always loved water animals, it's not something that has always been this much to the foreground, if that makes any sense. I've always done fishing, and at a very young age, I kept the fish that I would catch and I would put them in an aquarium when I was very little. That's how it started for me. That's how my aquarium hobby started. And I would always be on the side of the canal or a small lake, a very small lake that that I used to have in the area that I lived in. And I would catch frog eggs, and then I would put them in an aquarium, and I would wait for them to turn into tadpoles, and then I would release them again. And sometimes I would keep them all the way to the stage that they become like tiny, tiny frogs. So water animals is something that I've always been interested in. But there was a time in my life where I was more interested in horses. If you guys have been with me for a very long time, you know that I used to do horseback riding. From the age of 7 years old, the first horse that I ever rid on was called Freedom. Its name was an English name, and the horse was called Freedom. And that was the very first horse that I ever came in touch with. And after my first riding class, that is what got me into horseback riding all the way up until I was 16. Now, during this time, I was still in touch with water animals. I used to be so good at catching wild ducks. Not necessarily only a water animal, but they live in the water. And this one time, and I think I've probably told this story before in another video, I just can't remember which video because I have so many videos and I've been doing this for such a long time. But there is this group photo from a long time ago of me with my classmates, and I'm holding a duck. And I think that this was around the time that we went on kayaking camp. We had different types of camps in early high school, I think this was. I think it was early high school, but it might have been late elementary school. I can't remember. It's been too long. But I'm standing there with this duck. And my classmates always thought that I was super awkward because I was, back in the day when I was younger, I was very much of an outsider. I always wanted to fit in, but I never fit in. And I was honestly an ugly duckling. I was an ugly duckling because I was very tall for my age. I always stick out from almost everybody in the group photos from elementary school. I was about the same height as I am now when I was 13 years old. I had the same shoe size. I always used to dress like a tomboy because I was raised by my dad. And I would always be, building things and be very in touch with nature. So for me, when I was younger, especially when I was younger, friends, I didn't really have friends. I had friends in another way, though, and that were animals. Like for me, animals were my friends that I felt safe with because animals don't judge you. They give you unconditional love, and I know that a lot of you can relate to this. So I had some friends, and I had, in elementary school, I had a few boys living on the same street that I was living on, and they would play with me, like I would always play horse outside. Like I had like this stick with a horse head that I made with a friend of mine, and I would always pretend that that was my horse. And I would, play outside with them. But then as soon as the weekend was over or the holiday and we would have to go back to school, they basically kind of pretended like they didn't know me. So yeah, I'm just talking about my past and some of my memories and how animals are integrated into my past. So I was always busy finding little insects. I was very interested when I was a kid in these beetles. You have this specific type of beetle in the Netherlands that has like, I don't really know if they're teeth, but they move things that are attached to their nose. And sometimes in the summer, me and my grandparents from my dad's side would go to this camping ground that they had a caravan. And this was in an area in the Netherlands where the ground is much drier. So you had like all these really beautiful purple flowers. It was very dry and so many crickets. And I would always catch these insects, these beetles, and these crickets, green crickets, completely different than the ones that I've seen here. I believe they're even called differently. I don't think they're called crickets. But yeah, there is this one memory that I have when I was with my grandparents, and me and my grandpa went for a bike ride to a forest that was nearby. And we would drive through these fields that are kind of like dunes, a very dry landscape. And then we would get in the forest. And this was around the time when wild boars had babies. And my grandpa and I were going down this path in the forest. I don't even know how we managed to bike there because it was very muddy from what I remember. And we ran into this open space on the left side while we were biking with trees, and it was an open space. And there was this whole family of wild boars. The parents and then the babies. And we passed by there and we were just biking, like, slow because we were looking around. And my grandpa was like, okay, be very quiet and just keep on biking. Because he said that the parents of the baby boars could be very aggressive during this time to protect the babies. So I remember the adrenaline and the excitement, and of course you always remember things differently in your mind, but I remember the excitement of like, oh my gosh, are we gonna get chased? So as soon as we passed by this open space, we sped up a little bit to get out of there as soon as possible, and that was a very fond adventure for me. And my grandpa is still alive. My grandma died in 2008. She had really bad Alzheimer's. I was actually not happy, obviously, but I was relieved that she was released from her suffering when she passed away. But yeah, I always had these adventures with my grandpa, and he is now 93, and he still remembers this as well. And yeah, often in the weekend I would be with my grandparents, and I would always sit in the backyard and I would look at the birds in the backyard and observe them as I would make drawings of the plants in the backyard. So to loop back to the question that I asked earlier, is what is your favorite animal? It changed a lot during throughout my life so far. I'm 35 now. I don't have a particular favorite animal, but it's more like a group. So aquatic animals are definitely my favorite group of animals, even though I also have 2 dogs. I love bird watching, which I 100% got from my grandpa. I have a lot of very fond memories that my grandpa and I went on bike rides in Harlem. This area where you have canals, and the canal kind of turns into like a little lake, and then you have a lot of like grassy landscape around it, surrounded by fields with cows and geese and horses and sheep. And my grandpa and I would go on these bike rides, and we would just, take a break, eat a sandwich that we made at home, sit on a bench, and we would watch the birds. And my grandpa always had these binoculars that he brought with him, and we would just do bird watching. And a lot of the different types of bird species and what they're called, I learned from my grandpa. So I think I've told the story of my very first aquarium in a couple of my videos before, but the older you get, the more your memories seem to change. So when I was around, it must have been around 6 or 7, I think, around the same time that I started horseback riding, I really wanted a pet. And as my longtime viewers know, as my dad was sick, he had diabetes type 1, and it just became from bad to worse, basically, over time. And so he never had the time to, take on a dog, for example. I've always wanted a dog when I was little, but he didn't have the energy for that. And so my very first pet that I got, this is a little bit later, I think I must have been yeah, around that age, I think I got a rabbit. That was my very first pet. And this rabbit was called Ronja, Ronja. And I call her Ronja because it was based on a cartoon that I used to love watching, which was called something like Ronja the Viking's Daughter, I think it was. And I could always very much relate to her character. So that's why I got my very first rabbit, Ronja. So I've had this rabbit for quite a few years. Ronja was still alive by the time that my dad passed away when I was 16. And yeah, so I must have been a little bit older. I think I must have been 8 when I got my rabbit, because she became about 9 to 10 years old when she passed away. So yeah, anyways, that was my first official pet that I've ever had, Ronja. You know, in terms of something that you can grab and hold and cuddle. But before that time, when I was around 6 or 7, I think my very first pet that I had was a turtle. When I was around that same age, my dad and I sometimes would go and rent a motorboat, and we would go to an area in the Netherlands that has a lot of history that is called the Biesbos. And you have to cross this huge, wide canal to get to that area. And once there, the water is pretty shallow, kind of muddy too, but on a beautiful sunny day like today, you can actually see the fish in the water. And my dad and I would go fishing there, and I would see these massive carbs, like huge carbs. And they always kind of scared me, and they also fascinated me at the same time. And that's where I really got introduced into the aquatic life. I started catching different types of salamanders. Oh, salamanders, they're so cool. And, you know those little water skiers that are on the surface that always ski on the water? I don't know. Everything was just fascinating to me in terms of aquatic life. So, not long after, I gained a massive interest in turtles. And back in the day, they used to sell turtles in pet stores, like very small. They still do. And that was my very first aquatic pet, I think, that was bought at a pet store, other than, the wild salamanders and fish and tadpoles that I would catch myself and put in an aquarium. So turtles were just as new to me as they were to my dad. And of course, we were both not properly educated about what a turtle needs other than live food. So I would always dig up worms in the backyard. And, we always used to buy at the tack shop. We used to buy maggots to go fishing with, so I would feed that to the turtle. Just, they were just like water turtles, not like, land turtles. But they kept dying every time. I had a small turtle, and then, I had it for a few weeks, and then it would die. And I've had quite a few turtles, and they all ended up dying. And I thought that there was something wrong with me. After that didn't work out, I moved on to tropical fish. I don't think it was a goldfish. I think one of my very first fish was an angelfish, freshwater angelfish. You also have angelfish species that are saltwater, but I had the freshwater, and they also kept dying. So, throughout my childhood, it was quite traumatizing because I loved water animals, and the ones that I would catch in the canals would always continue to live on because I would bring water in a bucket with me, not knowing about water changes and all that stuff. But they would always continue to live. But everything that I would get at a pet store would always die. So for a very long time after that, I thought I was doomed to keep fish and aquariums and aquatic animals in general. So, let me take a huge step into the future. When did I start my channel? It was in 2012, but I just turned 24. So, 20, 21, 22, 20, 21, 22. So, yeah. So, when I was 21, I was in limbo. At the time, I had an eating disorder. I was living by myself. My life was completely messed up. And I took a year off after high school. My high school took 1 year longer. So my high school, I started when I was 13, graduated when I was 18, I think. And it was 1 year longer because I had to do 1 extra year because my dad died in the second last year, so I had to redo that one. Anyway, I took a year off because I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. I was working at a supermarket at a time that I was really good at. That's when I started practicing speaking English. English always intrigued me. And my lineup was always the longest because I always remembered people's stories and people's faces. And people would literally not go to other cashiers just because they wanted to talk to me or tell me how their dog was or how their family was doing. And I got a lot of English customers that would line up, that would learn over time that I spoke English as well. I guess a bit better than average at the time. So yeah, I was working in a supermarket, taking a year off, not knowing what to do with my life. So that's when I had 2 choices in my head. One of them was to go and study animal care management. The other one was to study psychology. At the time, I thought I liked both. I thought I liked helping people. And I'll come back to that in a sec. And I also thought that I liked taking care of animals. Now, later in life, I've learned that it wasn't necessarily that I liked taking care of people, but because I always took care of my dad, my definition of love was wrong. I thought as long as you can help people and as long as you can fix them, they will always love you. So for me, love meant helping and fixing people. So just a little sidetrack there. Anyways, because I had an eating disorder, I had bulimia at the time. That didn't last very long, thankfully. It was about 1.5 to 2 years that I had that, and then I got out of it. I figured that it wasn't the right choice for me to study psychology because I was like, even though this is what most people do, a lot of psychologists have had really rough pasts themselves, or they have problems. They kind of study psychology and they get out of it themselves, and then they can help people with similar problems. But for me, it just didn't rhyme in my head. I was like, I cannot study psychology if I myself am not mentally and emotionally stable. It would be really weird for me trying to help someone mentally and emotionally. Well, like for me, it was kind of like you have to practice what you preach. And at the time, I was really deep into my eating disorder and I wasn't able to help myself. So I was like, it's kind of hypocrite if I study psychology and then tell other people how to help themselves when I can't help myself. So that's when I decided to study animal care management instead. And I was able to do a faster trajectory than some other people because my high school diploma was at a higher level than the animal care study was. So I was able to condense the study into 3 years instead of 4 years. And that's when I got my animal care management degree. Now, during this time, I got in touch with a lot of different animals. They had a big stables there, so we had all the farm animals like pigs, goats, sheep, horses, ducks, chickens. What else do we have? Like rabbits, guinea pigs, all that. And then we also had a few classrooms that had that were set up to have different animals. So we had a classroom that had a lot of birds. We had a classroom that had a lot of rodents like mice, different species of hamsters, rats, things like that. And we also had a classroom with reptiles. So you had like your spiders, your cockroaches, your snakes, turtles, all that. And during this study, one of the requirements for me to do the fast trajectory of the study was I needed to do an internship in the summer holiday before the study would start. And that's how I came to work at a small petting zoo in my hometown, Haarlem, in the Netherlands, where I used to go to a lot when I was a kid with my dad. So now I started working there as a volunteer, and I did get grades for it that I could use to enter the second year of the study instead of having to start at the beginning. So I've had so many different types of experiences with different animals during the study. I think I made a video about it before. If you remember which video that is, feel free to comment down below. But yeah, I became my interest got, how do you say this? I got re-interested. My interest got sparked up again for aquariums. There was also a room that was the aquarium room. There were a lot of aquariums with different types of plants, freshwater, water, saltwater. And that's how I got into my aquariums again. The small petting zoo also had an aquarium that I worked at. And that's when I discovered a website called Marketplace. And I would browse Marketplace to see if people would get rid of fish or aquariums. And a lot of people actually got rid of their aquariums for free. And also, at the small petting zoo that I was working on, a lot of people would get rid of their aquariums and their fish, and they would just give it for free to the petting zoo. And I had a really good relationship with the manager at the time. So she told me that I could just take the aquariums and bring them home. So I ended up with a lot of aquariums in the Netherlands. I don't know if I still had any aquariums when I did my house tour video back in the day. I think I might have. But yeah, I ended up with a lot of different aquariums. And I actually was successful at it this time. And of course, I learned a lot through my study. I kind of made it my mission to specialize myself as much as I could in freshwater. And I graduated, however, with having to write a business plan. And that was for a saltwater aquarium store. And yeah, I got one of the highest grades of the class, and I was the only one that had to do the project by myself because my partner that was supposed to make this business plan with me was ill a lot, and eventually she missed so much of it that the teacher just told me, like, okay, just write the business plan by yourself. It wouldn't be fair for you to do all this work and then she gets the same grade. So, yeah, a guy from the bank came over. It was very serious. And you had to present your business plan to this person of the bank. And they told me that if I would have wanted to go to the bank with that business plan, that I would be approved for a loan to open up my own saltwater aquarium store, which gave me quite a kick back then. But yeah, I kind of floated away from saltwater, and I was more interested in freshwater. So yeah, I started having all these different types of aquatic animals. And after I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do again. I also needed some time off because at the time I was still suffering from my eating disorder and, other problems. And that's when I rolled into ASMR. Back in 2012, I rolled into ASMR. Yeah, so anyways, then in 2013, in August 2013, I ended up moving to Canada, and my aquarium hobby was kind of set to a halt. It came to a standstill. And the reason why it came to a standstill was because when I moved here, I really wanted to go to pet stores because I've always liked just walking into a pet store, having a look at all the animals. And that's when I discovered that in Canada, most pet stores are focused on cats, dogs, rodents, and birds, and they only sell products, but not actually animals. And most stores don't have live animals or anything aquarium related in Canada, which was so weird to me, because in the Netherlands every pet store has a live pet section, and they usually have rodents, birds, and fish. But here, not the case. So it was about after living here for about 2 years that I discovered Kijiji, which is the equivalent of Marketplace in the Netherlands, the website. Actually, Kijiji is made by the same people that made Marketplace in the Netherlands. It's made by a Dutch company, which I thought was interesting when I found out about that. So I bought my very first secondhand aquarium off Kijiji, and that's when I discovered PetSmart. Now, PetSmart nowadays is really kind of garbage. They don't treat their animals well. The aquariums look like absolute crap. But back in the day, when I moved here, I didn't know any better, so I went to PetSmart, and that's where I bought my first few fish, first few aquariums. And I did kind of fail at it again. I didn't know about cycling your tank, that you have to, when you set up a tank, you have to wait before you put livestock in it. Which I should have known through my study, but the water in the Netherlands was so different. It was much easier to start a tank. You didn't have to let it cycle for that long. The whole procedure was completely different. So I had that aquarium. Then eventually we ended up moving to this house that we're in now. And I tried it again, and it didn't work out again. So I ended up selling that big aquarium, and I ended up building my own fish room, and I ended up with smaller aquariums, 5 and 10 gallon aquariums. I'm like, okay, if I'm not good at big tanks, maybe I'm good at small tanks. So I ended up with a lot of small aquariums, and I built my whole fish room a little over 2 years ago now, and I actually became successful at it. Finally, for the first time in my life, I can keep plants alive, I can create aquascapes, I can keep any type of fish I want, and everything is good. So recently I switched to bigger aquariums, and I was very apprehensive of it. I was really scared that it wasn't going to work out again. But now I have two 20-gallon long aquariums, and I have two 30, well, I have one 28-gallon aquarium and one 30-gallon aquarium, and everything is thriving. And I am so excited that, you know, for the first time in my life in the last few years, I've actually been successful at keeping aquariums, because I get so much mindfulness and relaxation and peace from them. Whenever I'm stressed, I'm like, okay, we're not doing this right now. We're not talking to ourselves like that. Go clean an aquarium. Go scrub the glass. Go pick off dead leaves of plants, whatever. And it helps me tremendously. So, yeah, that was my little chit chat video for today about my favorite animal group, which are aquatic animals. And yeah, my history with animals, and how I kind of got into aquariums, and how I failed many times before I succeeded. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I will see if I can do an eating video again next week, since I noticed that a lot of you really love that. But yeah, so that's all I had to share, or all I have to share today with you about this specific topic. I hope that you are fast asleep by now. Let me know down below what you thought of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next week.